So thanks everyone for tuning in on this Sunday. Give you a quick view. Maybe I shouldn't show this to you guys because if you're considering moving to Canada, this might turn you away. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it's snowing. It's snowing pretty hard here in Toronto. So it looks like I'll be spending most of the day inside. So good timing for this live class. If you are here, feel free to say a quick hello in the chat. Let me know where you're from, whether you're in Canada, outside Canada, what country. That will also help me to kind of cater the presentation because there are certain different requirements whether you're inside the country or not. But I'm going to get right into it. The topic for today is 4 ways to increase your CRS score. Probably one of the biggest struggles or the most common issues that I see when talking to people interested in express entry is there's a lot of people within the 400 to 450 range, right? Which is a difficult range to be in. You're likely not going to get an invitation to apply unless probably unless you do one of these 4 things, because the calls recently have been in the 470s, the draws. So let's get right into the article, the class. It's based on a blog post that we posted earlier this week. I'm going to link it in the chat just so that everybody can access it if they want. That's what I'll be kind of referring to throughout the class, so you can take a read after, but I'm going to go into even more detail in this class, and then if you have any questions, feel free to shoot them into the Facebook chat and I'll make sure to answer them. So, 4 ways to increase your CRS score. Number 1, probably the easiest, let's call it, way to increase your CRS score is to get a better IELTS exam score. And what I'll do is I'll quickly break down how IELTS works, or a language exam works, as it relates to your CRS score. So for your CRS score, it's calculated based on your CLB level. So when you write the IELTS exam, the CELPIP exam, or one of the French exams, you get 4 scores. And based on those 4 scores, you're given what's called a CLB score, so a 1 overall score. And that's what's used to calculate your CRS score. So the long story short is, if you don't have a CLB 9 on IELTS or CELPIP or whatever test that you took, I'm just going to refer to it as IELTS for now because that's the most popular. If you don't have a CLB 9, then you're leaving a lot of points on the table if you are able to get a CLB 9. CLB 9 is 777-8, with the 8 being in listening. So if you wrote the IELTS and you didn't get 7778 with an 8 under listening, then you don't have a CLB 9, and it means that if you do, or if you are to rewrite and get that CLB 9, you're going to get a major boost in points. I think it's like a 30 or 40 point increase if you're able to go even from CLB 8 or CLB 7 to CLB 9. So tip number 1, if you have a low CRS score, you want to rewrite IELTS and get that CLB 9. That'll give you a huge boost. That one's pretty straightforward. Obviously, it takes time and effort to study and practice, and we have some resources for that as well. If you don't already have the Visto IELTS study guide, then ping me on Facebook directly. I will send it to you. We have a PDF. I wrote the IELTS exam 1.5 years ago. I was able to score pretty well. And so I put together a 5-page guide with some tips and how I studied and other free resources that you can rely on to study as well. So that's number 1, improve your IELTS score if you don't have a CLB 9. If you do have a CLB 9, you're going to want to focus on the other couple of options that I'm about to go into. Chizzy, nice to have you here today. Thanks for joining. Let me know if you have any questions along the way. Just shoot them into the chat, and I'll do my best to respond to as many as possible. So point number 2 in terms of how to increase your CRS score, and that is to get a graduate degree. And there's a few kind of points to this, especially because you can get a graduate degree within Canada or outside Canada. I'm going to talk about both because they're both really important. So again, all of this is under the guise of how do you increase your score? And the way the CRS score is calculated with regards to education is it takes your highest level and gives you points based on that. So the highest amount of points you can get in education is having a PhD or equivalent. I got to put my hand higher so I leave room for the other ones. The second highest you can get is a master's or professional degree, right? So masters of computer science, legal degree, medicine degree, those are kind of like the different professional degrees. The third highest is having 2 or more degrees or certificate or diplomas. So let's say you get 2 graduate or 2 bachelor's degrees or a bachelor's degree and like a 1-year certificate, a 1-year diploma, something like that. The level below that is a bachelor's degree. But unless you have any connection to Canada, if you have anything less than that third minimal level, so like the 2 or more degrees, you're going to have a very hard time getting a high enough CRS score. So if you're abroad, if you're not in Canada right now, and you have, in the mid 400s, getting a master's or a PhD can be a big boost in points, and it could be enough to get you over the hump, right? And the easiest way to calculate that is go on to the Immigration Canada CRS score calculator. I'll link to it in the Facebook chat, CRS score calculator, and just put in your information right now, but change the education, right? Change it to master's or PhD and see what happens. I'm going to link to it in the chat just so it's there. Chizzy, yeah, so your score, Chizzy asked his IELTS score is listening 7.5, speaking 7, reading 6.5, writing 6, overall 7. So I believe I think you're a CLB 7, because if you have 6 or above in everything, then I believe that's a CLB 7. But that's a perfect case, going back to talking about the IELTS exam, that's a perfect case of if you're able to score 777-8, with the 8 being in listening, you'll go to a CLB 9 and you'll gain a whole bunch more CRS points. And I can go into more detail at the end. I'm going to go through our 4 points quickly, and then I'm more than happy to answer all your questions. I just don't want to be jumping around from education to IELTS to education to all that stuff. But hold that thought and I'll come back to it. So back to education, if you're abroad and you don't have a PhD or a master's, or you only have a bachelor's degree, it's a really good, it's a good option to go get one of those. And you can do it abroad. Or the other option is that a lot of people don't consider, which is a really good one, is go do a graduate degree in Canada, or try to do a graduate degree in Canada. You don't have to go do a bachelor's degree, right? You don't have to go do a 3 or 4 year degree in Canada. What you can do is, and again, this is all assuming that you have the means to support yourself in doing that, right? It's expensive to go to school internationally. It's expensive to move. I understand that. So if it is a good possibility for you, consider applying to Canada, because you can go and do a 10 or a 12-month degree in Canada, and then not only do you get the education boost for having that additional degree, but you get additional points for a Canadian degree. So it's like the double whammy, where you get more points in education and that Canadian connection. The other thing it does is it unlocks a much smoother path to express entry, right? So for those of you who are outside of the country, you're just trying to apply for express entry. Another path to express entry that's a little bit longer, but it's through Canada, is you apply for a study permit in Canada, you go and you do a 10 or a 12-month or a 2-year degree. That makes you eligible for what's called a post-grad work permit, which means for the length of time that you studied, they'll give you an open work permit so you can work for any company you want. And then what usually happens is either you have enough points when you graduate because you have the additional degree and you have the Canadian degree, or you can work in Canada, and when you get a year of work experience in Canada, you get even more points. You also unlock the opportunity to apply through what's called the Canadian Experience class, which has different requirements from the Federal Skilled Worker program. So if you are struggling to increase your CRS score and you haven't considered applying to Canada to go back to school, it's a really good option. it makes the path to PR, permanent residency, a little bit longer, but it might make it a lot smoother because you can come here for school, you can still work part-time while you're in school, then you can get your post-grad work permit, so you can start working right away, gain Canadian work experience, and you'll have that many more bonus points. So that's number 2. So number 1 was improve your IELTS results. Number 2, get a graduate degree either abroad or in Canada. The third option is to find a job in Canada. And this one is tough. I don't actually talk about it too much in terms of my content, like the Visto content. We don't focus on it too much. I think what I'll do is probably write a guide on how to find a job in Canada from abroad. But the reason why I don't talk about it too much is it's very difficult, right? If you're abroad, it's hard to find companies that are even willing to interview people from abroad and then might be hesitant to hire you from abroad. And the real kicker, number 3, is there's very few companies that want to go through the sponsorship process, right? So you're facing a chicken and egg problem where companies don't want to sponsor you, but you need the sponsorship in order to get your PR, right? So chicken and egg, chicken and egg. Now, especially if you're a tech worker, you can be sponsored through a work permit. So especially the global talent stream, that's a whole other conversation. Companies can sponsor you on a work permit. You come to Canada, you work for 2 years, and then based off that 1 year of Canadian work experience, you get a whole bunch of bonus points. And then that makes it that much easier to apply through express entry. So that is an option, but it's very difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you 2 or 3 pieces of advice to help tech workers try and find a job from outside of Canada. But keep in mind, it is hard, especially because you're competing with a lot of people and there's only so many companies that are willing to sponsor foreign tech workers. But here's what I would, if I was a tech worker abroad, here is how I would approach trying to get a job. Number 1, I would try the other options first, to be honest. Number 2 is take a look at exactly what your skills are, right? What your occupation is, what your experience is, and look up tech startups in Canada that are hiring for those very specific roles, because you're already facing an uphill battle, right? Trying to get a company to sponsor you. If you're just applying to generic things and sending out generic resumes and generic cover letters, you're going to make it even harder on yourself, right? So you want to find really good fits. And the best way to do that is ideally you find companies that are hiring for your specific role, number 1. And number 2 is you're finding companies that have already used what's called the global talent stream. The global talent stream is a expedited work permit specifically for tech workers. And because it's been around for over 2 years now, you can do some research to find out which companies have used it. So you can go online, type in global talent stream, you're going to see some news articles and other articles that list companies that have used them, right? There's not just a giant list that says, here's all the companies that have used the global talent stream. But you can go onto news articles and a lot of them quote companies or give success stories of companies that have used them before, that have used that program before. Make a big list of those companies and find the ones that are hiring for specific roles that you have the experience for and try to reach out to them. Now you can go through their traditional process. You can, send your resume or whatever online through their website, through Indeed or LinkedIn. Or the other thing you can try is reaching out to the heads of HR directly, right? That can be, go on LinkedIn, type in the company name, find the employees within the company that might be doing hiring, right? So head of HR, head of talent, there's so many titles now within hiring in Canada, tech recruitment or just recruitment or recruitment specialist or any of those. Find those people and message them directly with a good message, right? If you say, hey, first name, I looked up your company, it's really exciting, I love what you're doing, I'm wondering if you're hiring, the first thing to probably ask is, I'm wondering if you're still hiring foreign workers. And just being honest with them and upfront, and I think that'll give you a better chance. So like I said, finding a job from abroad is very difficult. It can be done. I've seen it done many times because I did it a lot previously when I was practicing. But it's all about finding the right companies and taking the right approach. If you guys do have more questions about that, or you want to hear more about that or more of my suggestions, I might do a live class where I go more in depth onto all of that, because I did spend 2 years helping companies sponsor foreign workers. And so I have some other ideas on how I would approach it if I was the worker. But let me know, either shoot me a message or a comment or a post in our Facebook group. And if you do want to hear more of that, I could do a live class totally dedicated to just finding a job in Canada. So let's go to number 4, the fourth way to increase your CRS score. And that is to look for a PNP, right? PNPs are very hot topics. If you don't know what a PNP is, they're a provincial nomination program. And what those are is they allow different provinces to nominate candidates that may not have a high enough score otherwise, right? So right now, the last few draws have been, I think, 471 and 472 were the last 2 draws. So if you have below like a 465, let's call it, then you might have a tough time getting invited to apply. But that doesn't mean you don't have any chance at all, because provinces can nominate you. And as some of you may know, if you get a PNP approval, that's 600 CRS points. So that's an automatic invitation to apply through Express Entry. Now, there's generally 2 types of PNPs that are linked to Express Entry. There's a whole bunch of PNPs, but for the purposes of Express Entry, there's generally 2 types. Number 1 is you've submitted your profile to the Express Entry pool, and provinces will look in the pool for people who fit their requirements, and they will nominate you, right? So you submit your Express Entry profile. One day you get a message, a notification, Manitoba has nominated you for their PNP program. Then you go separately, you apply to Manitoba, they process your application, they hopefully approve it, then they nominate you through Express Entry. You get 600 bonus points, and you'll be invited to apply through Express Entry. That's option number 1. Option number 2 is there are PNPs that you can just openly apply to right away. You don't have to be invited to apply, right? So that is similar to Express Entry. You find the right province, you find the right program, you submit an application, you wait for their decision. If you're approved, you get your bonus points through Express Entry. So there's 2 of those. The thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of provinces and territories, and each one of them has multiple streams, right? So each province doesn't just have one PNP nomination program. They have multiple streams. So for example, they could have a stream for tech workers. They could have a stream for master's graduates. They could have a stream for agricultural workers. You know, there's a whole bunch of streams. So the hardest part, I think, about PNP is just learning about the ones that apply to you and that you're interested in. So if you are interested in doing some of your own research, we have a PNP guide, not a guide, but we have one blog post that links, it kind of gives you the introductory explanation of PNPs, kind of like how I just did here, and then it links to each province. So you can look through the provinces that you like, and you can find the ones that are the most fitting. I'm posting a link to that here in the Facebook chat. Hopefully you can see it. If you're interested in PNPs, I recommend giving that a read. But that's only so helpful because it means you still have to do a lot of research. So what I'm going to say for right now, there's simply not enough time to go through each province and tell you what might be fitting. But here's what I am going to do. Starting on Tuesday, so from now on, I'm going to be going live for these classes 3 times a week, Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. Mark down your calendar. The info will be posted in the Facebook group, and I will send Facebook reminders and emails. If you're on the email list, you'll get reminders, including the topics that I'm going to be covering each week. As well, these replays will be staying in the Facebook group so you can watch them after the fact. But what I'm going to be doing is probably out of those 3 live classes, at least one of them every week is going to be spent on a deep dive on a PNP. So I'm going to pick the top PNPs that apply for tech workers, and I'm going to do a deep dive on 1 to 2 of them a week and tell you what the requirements are, what steps you have to take, how to check your eligibility, what the costs are, all that good stuff. Because it seems to me, and I think I've heard this from a lot of people as well, that there are a lot of opportunities for PNPs. There's a lot of people that don't have a high enough score. They need help from something like a PNP, but there's just so much of them. There's so many of them, it's hard to understand which one applies to you. So I'm going to start going a little bit more in depth on the different PNP programs. And if you have any suggestions, again, or comments on specific classes or PNP programs or other topics you want me to cover, feel free to let me know. So to quickly summarize, the four they're not easy, but probably the four best ways to increase your CRS score. Number one, increase your IELTS exam results. Number two, I got to bring up the list because I forget them off the top of my head. Number two is to get a graduate degree. Number three is to get a job in Canada, which is difficult, but doable. Number four is go through a PNP. And so I'm going to go into more details, but that's it for the presentation today. I try to keep them to around 15, 20 minutes, so it's not, too much information, and it's hopefully really helpful. If anyone has any questions, I'm going to hang around for another probably 10, 20 minutes, or as long as you need me to. Shoot your questions in the chat. I'm happy to answer them. As well, keep an eye out on the group because I will be posting more info about topics for additional calls and or classes. And if you have any feedback or other topics or anything like that, then I'm open to it as well. If you have any questions, now's the time. I'll pan quickly once again to show you. This is what you guys are looking to move to. Oh, how do I get this good angle here? Anyways, I can't really show it very well. Oh, did it stop snowing? Oh no, it's still snowing. But anyways, it's cold here in Toronto this Sunday, but it's still a great country to live in. So I'm going to hang around for 1 or 2 more minutes. If you guys have any questions, if you don't have questions, then I'm probably going to get back to work. But I'll hang around and answer a few questions. Hopefully you found this useful. The other thing I'll mention is, if you're not already in the Visto community, like I said, I do these live videos 3 times a week. We post a whole bunch of content, blog posts, stuff like that. We have our private community Facebook group that I moderate, Canadian Immigration Lawyer, and I moderate it every single day, helping you through the process. So if you are watching this not in the confines of our private Facebook group, then I highly recommend you check out visto.ai, visto.ai, to sign up and join the community.